Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Jonah and the Pod. Today, we have a very special guest, as his mug says. This is an extremely interesting episode because I've had quite a few people that aren't from church, some people that I have never met. But this one is someone that I went to school with, I met, but we haven't seen each other in probably 11 years. And we weren't extremely close in school, but it's cool to see how our worlds are colliding now. So everyone, please welcome my brother Paul, or as he is also known as the other Paul.
That's right, the one and only. Well, just the other.
That's right. So the reason why I say the other Paul is because he has a YouTube channel. It's just YouTube, right? Is there anywhere else?
It is predominantly YouTube, but I also have a website, and I do technically have other side channels, although they're kind of dormant for the moment.
Yeah, okay.
Although eventually, once YouTube starts to get a little bit worse than it currently is, then I'll probably start shifting to those.
Yeah, okay. So he has a YouTube channel. I don't know how many subscribers he has. A lot more than I do, which is cool. But God has blessed him in that regard. I was saying this to you before. I was like, it's daunting because my this episode and last episode, it's like the two of the smartest people when it comes to the Bible. So Paul has, if you guys know, I'm going to name some names. He's had James White on his channel. He's been on Redeemed Zuma's channel. You didn't have him on your channel as well, right?
I have, actually.
Oh, you have?
I think maybe a couple of times. Although one of the times was actually, it was in this kind of party stream type thing with a bunch of different guys, but we just randomly, I think Zuma might have been in the chat because we were kind of friendly by that point. And when we saw him in the chat, we're like, "Hey, Zuma, we'll send you an invite. Come and join us." And he just casually joined the stream while he was walking. Right. So that's one time, and that was pretty fun.
So like these, if you guys don't know these people, they're what would you call them? They're just like I would say this is going to sound weird, but they're pillars in Christian content.
Yes, yeah, maybe theology e-celebrities.
I like that. That's better than that.
Maybe that's the way to put it.
I'm going to let you speak. I'm not going to do all the speaking. But what I will ask you, how would you describe your content to people that don't know? I'm just going to fix the lights.
Not a problem. I would describe my content to people who don't know about it as basically my own attempt to bring the deepest good truths and facts of Holy Scripture, theology, and history, especially at the moment church history, but I want to be broader than that as well, to a lay audience in a way they can understand it. But also not just that, because there are many channels that purport to do the same thing. You've got like Kings and Generals, for example, one of the epic ancient history battle documentary channels. You've got tons of channels like that. I specifically want to give such content in such a way that people don't just listen to me and rely on me, but they can actually do their own study afterwards. And so I place a premium on citing everything. Every bit of information that I assert, whether it's about a theological topic, biblical, historical topic, I cite every single source that I rely upon, so that people can chase it up themselves to actually verify it, check me, and do their own study. Because I think that's a massive shortfall with many channels where they'll either only cite partial sources they use, or they won't cite any at all. And so people just basically it's basically a trust me bro type thing. Where it's just, hey, I said this is the case, you just have to believe me. And so if the person wants to actually study it, they can't rely on that source anymore. They have to go somewhere else. But I want to be the place where people can, no, here's the events, here's at least my interpretations of it, but here's all the sources you can check it for yourself. So that's kind of my primary thing, all for the edification of the body of Christ.
Nice, I like it. Would you say your audience is probably like people with similar minds to you, or would you say like similar sort of concepts, or is it people like that just don't know, willing to learn? Or
gosh, that's a tough one. I mean,
it's obviously hard for you to fully know, but
yeah. I think ultimately every channel kind of attracts people who are at least in some degree similar in mind to the person doing it, because the content is the production of the person's mind, and that's the stuff they like. Other people who are of a similar mindset will like it more so. So I'd say, a fair number of people who follow my channel, as far as I've met them, whether online or in person, they tend to be at minimum of the same general desire for truth and fact seeking for the glory of God.
Yeah.
Otherwise, though, they can vary wildly. I mean, in the Christian traditions, like even though I'm very overtly Anglicanism, become Anglican or else type of stuff. Even though I'm like that, I have many fans and other content makers who I collaborate with who are Baptists, non-denoms, Roman Catholic. I like to use the term Romanist, not as an insult, but it's just to level the playing field because we Anglicans believe we're Catholic too. So we don't want to give the term to someone else. But anyway, so Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Orientals, all across that spectrum of the big traditions. I have plenty of people who like my content and watch it for that. Even when I operate in an apologetic or polemical context, they can still, I still try to put it in a way where they can respect me for it and we can have a good dialogue on that. So yeah, content is generally Christian oriented. But within that Christian milieu, there's like a lot of different people. So that's kind of the best grip I have on it.
That's cool. I said this before the podcast, but we probably won't talk about content too much. But if you do want to check him out, please, there's a link in the description, and just search The Other Paul on YouTube. Or what's your website? Is it The Other Paul?
TheOtherPaul64.com. I had to put 64 because
you didn't find the domain.
Yeah, someone already took it.
Yeah, fair
someone
enough.
who doesn't really look that great, to be honest. But yeah. And then I had okay, what do I put in it? 64. Well, 64 is kind of the main estimated date of the Apostle Paul's martyrdom, so it kind of fits.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah. So yeah, just check it out. Again, they'll be in the description, but if you just want to search it, do that. All right, let's get into who you are now. And this is going to be very interesting for me because I only know Paul from the ages of like 12 to
I think so
17.
I came to Toonie
15.
I came to Toonie around when I was 10 or 11. So year 5. Partway through year 5, that's when I came in.
Okay.
And then I left at the end of year 8. So
like 10 to what was that?
around
14?
Around 10 to 13, I believe.
13?
Actually, no, 10 to 14. I think 14 is about right, yeah. So yeah, that's the gap.
Yeah, so a lot of things have definitely changed. I was going to say probably. Definitely changed in my life and in his life. But we're probably going to focus on you a bit more today. They've heard too much about me. So firstly, what are you doing currently? Like what's like for work? Obviously we have the YouTube content, just hobbies or what's like interest, whatever. Just introduce yourself to how you would introduce yourself to anyone.
So I guess I'm Paul Facey. I am an Anglican, very committed Anglican Christian, and particularly of a very traditional stripe as well. I love traditional Anglican liturgy, traditional Anglican theology. So that kind of gets me some weird looks from some more evangelical Anglicans, but and interesting conversations with Reverend Old. I won't lie, but but otherwise I keep it good. I don't go to the extreme of Anglo-Catholicism, if you're much familiar with that. But yeah, I like that kind of stuff. That's kind of where I center a lot of my focus with life and work and what have you. Otherwise, though, I do greatly enjoy the study of history. Scripture as well, of course, although we talked a fair bit of that, but also a lot of history as well, because I do like to take the perspective to, if I make it a bit esoteric, I do like to take that perspective of many of the ancient historians, like you got Polybius or Diodorus Siculus or Thucydides, and they speak about how history as a discipline, its utility lies in how you learn from the cause and effect of past events and you use that for wisdom for the present and the future. So that's why I love the study of history a lot and want to do more writing along that. Otherwise, I work in a library, won't say where, but I work in a library 1 day a week. And so that's my jam. That's my wheelhouse. I like it quite a bit. I'll tell you where after exactly. You probably know it actually.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of that. And then other than that,
can I ask what you do in the library?
Yeah. In the library, well, so far it's just a bunch of stock take. Although that's kind of a consistent thing you do throughout the year. But otherwise, I loan books out to people, return loans, do print requests for people, digitize text for them. Yeah, that kind of basic stuff. Help people find resources that they need, and yeah, basically along those lines.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then otherwise, recreationally, I have gamed quite a bit, like PC gaming in particular. Although I'm kind of laying that off now a bit just to kind of make sure my time is properly prioritized, to put it lightly. So not much gaming anymore, but otherwise, if there's with friends or what have you, I'll do a fair bit of that. But otherwise, the main focus recreationally, I guess, is basically have a lot of good mates. We go out, have social times, whether it's at a pub or another guy's place or somewhere else. Particularly focus, and they particularly tend to be like-minded friends, even if many of them are actually Roman Catholic, funny enough. And so wherever we go out, we like to talk deep and meaningful topics quite a lot while having a lot of fun as mates. And so there's that. Yeah, gaming, and not a huge amount other than that. Obviously, attend church.
Yeah,
I do that.
Yeah.
And I want to start contributing more with the work on that. Even though I only relatively recently came to St. John's, I do nonetheless want to start serving more and more in the parish.
So do you attend the morning service, the night service?
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
So the 8 a.m. service, it's because it's the more traditional one. Relatively speaking, obviously, if you go back 200 years, they think, what is this, liberalism? But relatively speaking, it's the most traditional service there. So I do like to attend that one. Yeah, okay. Although I do want to, at the same time, go to other services with more people my age so I can start connecting with them more as well. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, this is very good, very good overview, rundown. So I think let's get into your testimony. Sort of just you can start from however early you want, but just I guess how you came to the person that you are now, and the position you are in now, and all that kind of stuff.
I have to really. This is going to be the greatest TLDR of my life. My word, how to condense all that. It's incredible. I guess born and raised in a small Pentecostal church by my parents, and they both met in that church as well. Mm-hmm. And so raised in that, we left that church when I was around 10 years old, and it was roughly concurrent with when I started going to Toongabbie Christian. I think it was a touch before that, because I do remember seeing one guy at Hillsong. So we went to Hillsong after this small church. Because I remember seeing one guy at the young kids thing who I would then later see on one of my first days at Toongabbie Christian. I was like, oh, I remember him from Hillsong. So that's how I remember that. It was Hillsong a touch before Toongabbie Christian. Yeah, okay. But yeah, up to that point, I was homeschooled like my other siblings were. And so started going to Hillsong. Then shortly after that, parents put me in Toongabbie Christian partway through year 5, I believe. And so doing all that, and as you can probably remember, I was socially one of the background kids. Always hung around in more of the nerdy circles and what have you. Always kept up the I guess participated in the usual divide of the nerds and the jocks that we somehow inherited from America, or perhaps it's just that ingrained in human society, nature. Yeah, and so so that was obviously something big with that. Otherwise, though, and obviously that's where we met, kind of. But it's like we weren't as I think as you said earlier, we weren't like extremely close mates or whatever. Obviously, we're friendly with each other. You're one of the more friendly ones in particular with me, I guess, compared to some other people. But obviously, no dramas, be that as it may. Yeah. And so I just kind of floated through school. I never really was a high achiever, really. Didn't really put a huge ton of effort into it, except for like the occasional, this one particular topic we're doing in this class I kind of like, so I'm going to try and do really well at that.
History?
Not even actually. No, not even. I actually wasn't a big history guy. Apart from just like, here's a cool fun fact. Yeah. Other than that, history as a discipline, I didn't really care about at all. Actually, it was more creative writing, which I cared for more cool. In English. And I still do kind of, that's probably something I should have mentioned in the intro. I do kind of dabble in that still as well. Creative writing, art. Want to get more into that a little bit. Cool. But and languages, I'm getting a lot more into that, especially. But otherwise I did not care about those things except creative writing in school. So I was always like really anxious for, okay, when's the next creative writing task for English coming up? For English, didn't care about anything else, just creative writing. I wanted that. And obviously we had German class in year 7, especially. I did not care about that, and I regret not caring about that because I want to learn more languages now. And yeah, otherwise socially, I was always in more with the background kids, but also the kids who loved to play handball. That was our space, especially the big kind of slab squares right next to the canteen. That was one of the main spots, year 7 to 8. Fire out the flood of memories now. It's kind of bonkers. Wow.
It's funny because like not many people can understand what we're talking about.
Absolutely. This is probably one of your most niche episodes possible. There's like a tiny fraction of viewers who are like, yeah, I remember all that. This is awesome.
Yeah. But I guess everyone can relate to like, oh yeah, handball in year 7 sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So handball, hung out with the nerd kids because I was one of them, and I obviously love them all. And then actually finishing year 8, my parents decided we're going to move down to the Sutherland Shire, so we do that, and I do 1 term of year 9 in Sutherland Shire Christian School. Although actually slightly before that, towards the latter part of my time at Trinity Christian, that's really when the thinking part of my faith really began. And it was just with the simple question of, why did God deign certain things to be sin? Because I thought even at that age that he didn't just do that for no reason. There's a certain rationale why this thing is that. And I think I was particularly focused on homosexuality at the time, just because the debates were really flaring up at that time somehow. Yeah. So I was thinking, okay, why did God deign this and other things sin? And so that was kind of the first area of research I got into. And that's really where the more academic interest, if you will, in
that's a very good question
started with. Yeah.
Good question.
So started with that. But anyway, year 8 finishes. I only do 1 term at Sutherland Shire Christian School. And then the other 3 terms in year 9, I just do homeschool. But then after that is when I then go to St. George Christian School in Hurstville or Alloway area. And I do years 10 and 11 there. And it was particularly there where, well, again, I hung out with the similar kind of cliques again over there. I hung out with some of the more background nerd, tech, gaming type oriented kids. But the thing I found really interesting about that school is even though those cliques did exist, but they were nowhere near as clear. Like everyone was actually explicitly friendly with everyone there. Cool, yeah. Like the most sporty of the sport kids with the nerdiest of the nerd kids. They were all actually very friendly with each other. Yeah, wow. Not that there weren't any dramas, but there was actually a lot of commingling between the different cliques, which was really fascinating about that school. So even with me being a kind of socially background type of kid, I thought I did all right there. It was a good school. But it was there, and particularly around, I want to say year 11, when I decided, okay, Paul, socially, you are inept. you need to do better if you want to actually do well in life. So that's when I explicitly started to push myself to just be socially a bit better. Was it after year 11 or was it? I think it was during year 11. Either that or year 10, but I'm fairly certain it was during year 11 when I really was explicitly, okay, let's start to be socially a bit more competent, in order to get, especially if you want to get married, for crying out loud. So, because that was my weak spot, especially to talking with the opposite sex was a really big weak spot for me, especially unless they happen to be another big nerd. But be that as it may, it's all of our struggles, bro. Oh mate, don't get me started. But so started to improve myself in that, but that's also around years 10 and 11 is also when I started to get a bit more like politically conscious, So I just obviously adopted the views of my parents, like, yay, Liberal Party, Labor bad. The very easy dichotomy, It's so simple. Life was so simple back then. But then especially with the US election in 2016, and that was when I was in year 11. Excuse me. And that's when things started to get really fun, because even though it was the politics of a completely different country, that affected the social life in our little school in Sydney, in South Sydney. It was incredible.
Yeah.
I was one of the few kids who was like, oh, I kind of like Donald Trump. Just largely because of the vibe, you know.
The vibe.
It's largely because of that.
Yeah.
But so I was one of the only ones there, and I was also one of the only kids whu thought, you know, I think he could actually win. And so come the day when he won, this is one of like the few times photographed in my memory. Me and my cousin were following the election results live the night before, and it was before, or the day before. It was the day before school, and we saw, oh my gosh, he won! So awesome, so epic. And then I walked into school the next day with the biggest, I won't say that word, grin, the biggest, most obnoxious grin in my entire life, walking in there. And I go up the stairs to the door of my homeroom. I open up the room and I just hear bah, 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 like all hell breaking loose. Like everyone's just going crazy with conversation. Like, how did this happen? This is nuts or whatever. And I just walk in there calmly with that grin. I just calmly sit down at my desk. And I just look at everyone like,
I was right.
I was right. I was right. And people started to talk with me, blah, 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 going crazy about it. But yeah, to kind of bring it back, I was very generically conservative politically and what have you.
Yeah.
But over time, especially after that, end of year 11, at the very end of 2016, we moved back to Toongabbie.
Were you going to church during this time?
Yes. Actually, thank you. That's something I forgot to mention. So it was another small Pentecostal church.
Okay.
That we went on to, and that's especially that church was especially where my self-perception of my social abilities became a bit more obvious, and why I needed to change and all that. So yeah, that was that church, small one down in I think I want to say it's Sylvania, around there. So went to that, but then end of 2016 comes, and the parents decided to move us back to Toongabbie because they still have work in Western Sydney. So we moved back there. I do not do year 12. Like I was actually very clear. I don't want to do year 12. I just want to go like straight to do a diploma at Alpha Crucis College, because I was able to get in there rather than do year 12, which is still to this day one of the best decisions I've ever made.
That's, you know, it's funny that like I didn't know this about you, but that's what I did. I got a diploma. I got a diploma of sport development.
Oh, wow.
I left after year 11. So what was your diploma?
Diploma of leadership, but it was it was basically a first year Bachelor of Theology at Alpha Crucis, which I would end up going to do right after that. So yeah, we moved back to Toonie.
So like, was there a moment that you think like, okay, I'm a Christian now, sort of thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, the good thing with me is that I kind of always just assumed that identity. I always assumed, yes, I'm a Christian, like just inherited from my parents. And then even when I started consciously thinking about it, I wasn't thinking like, am I really a Christian? Do I really believe this? I was like, no, I took it for granted. Yeah. So, but I just had these questions. How do I resolve that? But it's good timing, because that's when things start to shake up. So perfect. To kind of cycle it back just a touch again, like towards the end of my time at the Shire, that's when I also, on top of politics, I started to get more theologically conscious as well. So I started to explore even deeper issues. I think chiefly the death penalty and women in ministry, which I don't want to make that another debate in the comments in this, so I'll just leave that at that. If people want to know my opinions, you can hit me up on my channel or whatever.
Yeah, look at this channel. I'm sure it'll be there.
So yeah, those two questions in particular I started to address more theologically, and obviously that naturally blossomed into other questions. And so it was natural that I decided, I will do the diploma in leadership, because I think I do actually have an interest in theology. Initially, I was actually kind of against it. Like I wanted to do something else. Like I don't know what it was, something else. In fact, one of the big things was probably game design, which is still, I still want to do that as a hobby. But I eventually decided, I will do the diploma in leadership, because I actually am quite interested in theology. And these are big questions I have, and this may actually be the area for me. I go in there 2017, diploma of leadership, and it was basically around then when like the crisis of faith like smacked me, because I was also now starting to get into, okay, what are opponents of the faith saying? And I didn't just settle for the pop level opponents, like maybe you've heard names like Bart Ehrman or whatever, and who was like Dan Barker, like the pop level opponents of the Christian faith. Like even at that age, I realized there's a difference between the pop level people, they give some level of substance, but then there's the more niche background guys who are like the real intellectual heavy hitters. And so I realized that early. And so I didn't really care for Bart Ehrman and other popular level opponents of the faith. I was looking for like the niche blogs by like academics, or at least extremely well-learned opponents of the faith, and what they said. And obviously me being 16, 17 at the time, that hit me like a ton of bricks, like a really big ton of bricks. And so I was reading a lot of them, consuming a lot of them. I was seeing what the Christian apologists were saying at the same time. And I was recognizing that in many times the Christian apologists were not being totally truthful, or at least were blundering in certain points. And so that kind of, what's the word? It kind of, it accumulated. It became a cumulative effect of, oh man, here's these deep, nuanced atheist bloggers and what have you, and here's these Christian apologists regularly fumbling it and all that jazz. Particularly on the questions of like the history and the Gospels, whether they're reliable. That was the really key one. And so it kind of accumulated, and I came like a hair's breadth from apostasy, like really close. Even one kind of emotional interaction with my mum, that's when it was like at the tipping point. Like it was so close to snapping. But then, by 100% by divine grace, two things stopped me from going. So one was, okay, I have to rewind again to a Hillsong camp that I had actually right after my family moved from Toongabbie to the Shire. So this is back at the very end of 2014, and I left my house in Toonie for the last time to go to this Hillsong camp, and after that camp, I would go to my new house in the Shire. So it was kind of a transition. I didn't have to help with any of the packing. Let's go. So at that Hillsong camp, just in one of the tent worship sessions, I was just kind of standing there as they're singing. I'm just like, yeah, cool, whatever. And then my RDG leader, he comes, hey, Paul, can I pray for you? I'm just like, yeah, sure. And as he's praying for me, out of nowhere, bang, just this mad, I still can't really describe it, but just like a mad internal bang presence that just whacked me. I don't know. I wasn't emotionally engaged with the worship or whatever at all. I wasn't like, I wasn't drab, but I wasn't like, yeah, praise Jesus. It wasn't like a suggestive thing.
Just indifferent sort of.
Yeah, exactly. I was very indifferent. I was just kind of there, mainly for the friends. but suddenly this internal presence just smacks me, and somehow I know instantly this is God. That somehow this is God. And then like I spend the next like 5-10 minutes just bawling my eyes out. So that event, going back to my near apostasy in 2017, I hung on to that event, knew that was something, that was definitely a God thing. So before you actually give this all up, let's actually take a closer look. And that's when I came upon, by God's grace, the key principle that completely reversed the course for me, like from near apostasy to having more confidence in my faith academically than ever. And that is, I noticed, even at that age, that with these apologists for unbelief, that whether intentionally or not, they always project this air of neutrality around them. That, we don't have these faith-based assumptions like these Christians do. We're purely academically inclined. We care purely for fact and truth, and that's the only thing that guides us. And we're all critical thinking. And so I looked at that and I thought, okay, that's the key theme there, critical thinking. So rather than just taking everything they say for granted as if, great atheist blogger, please tell me the truth. And I always hold up the Christian apologist against them as if it's always the Christian apologist being judged and it's the unbeliever who sits in the judgment seat. That's kind of implicitly how it happened with me psychologically. But then I decided, no, let's turn it the other way around. Let's start applying the critical thinking back to their claims. And it fell apart like a ton of bricks. Their assertions about various claims about the Gospels and what have you, where I could see them making certain claims and what have you. Like trying to think of, there's so many different examples of it. But so think of like any relatively common claim you might hear against gospel reliability. And like, I think one of them, for example, was that, the Gospels kind of have these similar features to this ancient Greco-Roman novel, which was knowingly fictitious. And I think I just looked back at that and just thought, okay, but there could be any number of motivations for why the gospel authors chose to write the Gospels the way they did, in a more narratival way that doesn't therefore mean it's not actually true historical record. That's an assumption. That's an assumption they're imputing on those texts. That was one example. Not to mention whether they actually were similar in various features that they were alleged to do. And I'd investigate that and I'd find questions for that as well. But anyway, episode in its own right. But basically, I turned the critical thinking back on them. And I saw that, well, their cases didn't exactly hold up. And so at that point, I came back from the brink of apostasy. And I basically committed, I'm gonna study not just Bible stuff as I am in college right now. I'm gonna actually study classical antiquity as well, the context in which these scriptures actually came about, particularly the New Testament. Yeah. And so I started on that. Been doing a lot more of that ever since. And yeah, I've only found, eventually discovered that all claims, the idea of people having an air of neutrality around them it's a complete farce. There is no such thing as a true neutrality. Everything, all of our observations and propositions, they're all built upon layers of presuppositions, as they're called, or axioms, or whatever you want to call them. And so this whole thing of the unbeliever, whenever they try to portray themselves, oh look, we're just fact based. It's just kind of, for me, it just went in one ear out the other. It's like, no, I don't believe you. Like that's literally impossible. And so so that kind of brought me off the brink from unbelief. And so my theological development continued, study more of the issues, study them more deeply, studied Greek and Hebrew in college with a bachelor.
Was the Bible college like a denomination, or?
It was, so Alpha Crucis College, it's pretty much like, they don't call it a seminary, but it's basically the seminary, if not one of them, of the ACC, the Australian Christian Churches, the main Pentecostal denomination in Australia. Yeah. So it's basically Pentecostal oriented. Yeah. Okay. And of course, me being Anglican is kind of the opposite now. But
I'm curious as to the change. But yes, I guess we'll get to that.
yes, we will. And that starts shortly after the stuff with the apostasy, or the near apostasy rather. Yeah. Shortly after that, studying more things in the faith. By chance, I happened to find this event advertised on Facebook, and it's like, oh, this looks kind of cool. It was at St. Mary's Cathedral in the city, and so I go there, and that's where I meet my first batch of my traditional Roman Catholic friends. Like very traditional. And I made them there, and then there's another event the week after, meet more of them, and that's when I basically had my first serious interactions with Roman Catholicism, or Romanism as I call it, because again, we Anglicans, we're Catholic, but we have those interactions, and I quickly see that even though I had initially assumed, oh, Rome, they worship Mary, they do this and that bad thing. And I quickly see that I don't actually know a whole lot about Rome. And typically at that point of the story, I would be one of the thousands of testimonials where I was this evangelical Protestant, but then someone asked me, did you know Luther removed 7 books from the Bible? And did you know everyone believe in authority of church? And it's like, oh, no way. I must become Catholic now. That's pretty much every conversion story. Pretty much every conversion story. But again, by God's grace, I still had my intellectual tools I developed from my investigations of the claims of unbelievers. And so I simply applied that of a desire for good, accurate historical research to the claims of Rome. And even with that first salvo of claims, which tend to be the heavy hitters that move many evangelicals or Protestants generally in the direction of Rome or the East, I quickly see big problems with them, because I want to actually be very accurate and consistent with my historical method. And that's when I first basically get involved with those kinds of debates and discussions, looking at the different blogs and of both sides, see what people claim. There were some times when I thought, oh man, I don't know about this Roman claim, but then eventually I'd find, okay, it actually doesn't really work well. And that it's basically that for 1 or 2 more years, which is basically a bit more of that over 1 or 2 more years, interactions with those claims, other Roman Catholic friends. That's when I decide eventually, I think I want to make a YouTube channel. So I made it in 2019, but uploaded like next to nothing, like 1 or 2 measly videos. But it's just because of the time I had still with my studies that I wasn't able to do more. But then towards the end of 2020, I think it was towards the end of 2020, when I see, you know what, I've got a good window of time in the summer break. Let's start making some content. And that's when the channel really begins. The other Paul, as was introduced. And I basically make it with the purpose that I said at the start, where it's all about just being able to bring the most complex of big academic issues to a level that's understandable for laymen, for the edification of the church. And at that time, I was still a Pentecostal, so I wasn't exactly like, yay, Anglicanism or anything. It wasn't even on my radar.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be a good, generally Protestant Pentecostal Christian. So that's where that started. And one of my first proper videos when I properly started the channel was a response to claims that, oh, look, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 26, when it speaks of Mary as full of grace, allegedly, that's from the Latin Vulgate, gratia plena, or in the Greek properly, kecharitomene, which just means favored one. And I respond to the claim that, oh, look, in the Greek, it means that she's the recipient of like a past grace, and it's like it's perfectly completed in her, therefore the Immaculate Conception. And in that video, I basically take my Bible college education and show, no, that's not the case. and that's basically the rest is history. I interact more with the claims of Rome and eventually more of Eastern Orthodoxy as well, because that's starting to pop up a lot as well. Yeah. And make content along those lines, along other biblical theological issues as well, not exclusively those, but those are a big chunk and still are to this day a big chunk of my content, interacting with those other traditions. But the other big development between then and now is that even in my disagreements with Rome in the East, I do start to see what I think are deficiencies in much of charismatic, Pentecostal, and really just evangelical Christianity, where it's very much, in my opinion, I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with me, but
Probably,
it's very much, in my opinion, marketized, modernized, and focused, and like numbers focused.
I don't disagree with you then.
Yeah. And especially in the context of Hillsong, because I was still going to Hillsong at that point. The concert worship, and it was for like some years at that point, I was going more and more, did not like it. I did not like the concert worship. And so with that, even despite my disagreements with Rome in the East, I nonetheless came to appreciate, okay, no, we should actually take seriously the historical pedigree of the church, the historical path that was laid before us by the church fathers, especially of the earliest centuries. So I started to get more of an interest in them, studying scripture in that light, and yet while maintaining that scripture itself is supreme in its authority above all of them. But I nonetheless came to opinions that would be more Anglican friendly, but I still nonetheless was not thinking of Anglicanism as an option. It's only in early 2021 when I decided, okay, I'm sick of the concert worship, that I decided to leave Hillsong. And no offense to any Hillsong goers there, but that's me. That's when I decided to leave Hillsong because of that and try to find another church home. But early 2021, right after I leave Hillsong, that's when the hard lockdown hits. And so that happens, and even a little bit after that happens later, after that kind of loosens later in the year, I'm still looking for a church home. So in total, I go basically a year without church. By chance, I'm at a Roman Catholic friends party one day in May of 2022, or maybe just before that. No, I'm pretty certain it was May. And I'm talking with a Roman Catholic friend, Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, that type of stuff. And then this one young lady comes up to us and she says, hey, can I just sit with you guys and kind of overhear your conversations? Because these issues kind of interest me a fair bit. And so we're like, yeah, sure, whatever. But I kind of just immediately pivot to her anyway, just ask her like, hey, what's up? What's your story and all that? And she basically tells me, I'm born and raised Roman Catholic, but I'm questioning certain Roman claims on the nature of justification and grace. And so I am now, at the same time as going to Roman Catholic Mass, I'm going to an Anglican church. And I ask her, oh, wow, cool. Okay, where is that? And she tells me, St. John's, Parramatta. I look it up on my phone and I realize, it's that. I thought that was just a heritage building in Parramatta Square. I didn't know it was actually an active church, And so I think, you know what, that's actually right near me, and I'm still looking for a church. So I might give it a go. Yeah. So I go there. I first try out the 5 p.m. service, I believe, which is where all like the uni age kids, our age, where they all go. And I go there and I immediately think, you know what, yep, this is my home, because I was generally just looking for any kind of generally reverent, more reverent Protestant church, even if it was kind of contemporary. My preference was actually for like a traditional Presbyterian church, but I otherwise didn't mind, even if it was going to be Baptist. You know, I wasn't. That's the difference. I wasn't really investigating the traditions per se. I just wanted a generally faithful and more reverent Protestant church to call home. But by providence, I believe, I'm guided to St. John's. So I go there for the 5 p.m. service and I say, you know what? That's it. This is my home. Next week, I'm going to try the traditional service. And it's actually, the timeline's very clear here, where that first week, I try 5 p.m. The week after, I do the 8 a.m., but that's also the same day. I believe it was right after church. That's when I did my live stream reacting to the 39 Articles of Religion, which is one of the foundational documents for Anglicanism. So I do that stream and I'm basically, okay, I'm in an Anglican church now. And as a man of principle, I want to know what I'm getting myself into. Even though I would kind of later discover that many self-professed Anglicans, unfortunately, don't really take these authorities seriously, but I did. So I did that live stream and I found that I agreed with something like 95+% of the articles, but the main disagreements were with the Eucharist, because at that time it clearly teaches in the articles that the Eucharist, the bread and the wine, is not just a symbol, but we actually receive by faith the body and blood of Christ mystically by that. At that time, I was just an ardent memorialist. No, they're purely a symbol, purely from remembrance. And then on the article of baptism, I was kind of similar, but I was kind of in flux. I was actually kind of open to the idea that baptism is not just a symbol, but I still wasn't sure then. But eventually, as I'd attend that church and I'd study more in church history, Holy Scripture, and in the Anglican tradition as well, I'd actually come to be persuaded that no, like without regard to any particular theory, in some real and mystical way, we really do partake in the body and the blood of Christ by faith through the Eucharist, and that baptism in a real way, it's not merely a symbol or a declaration, but that we really are baptized into Christ's body through baptism. And so that happens, and then eventually I come to not just be a casual Anglican, but I come to be very assertive. No, I believe this is the way. Yes, this is the best tradition. Yes. And so I start to more and more orient my channel around that kind of perspective, and I'm still in that process right now where I want to be more explicitly an Anglican channel rather than just being kind of generally, I just look at whatever topic I like in the Bible and all that stuff. I want to make my channel identity more clear, like the Anglican guy, basically. Yeah. And so that's basically leads us to today.
Very good. That's a good overview. It's going to be so funny because I'm going to have like all my church friends. Like my church friends are a lot smarter than I am. And like, I say smarter, they're more theologically inclined.
Yes.
So they're gonna be like, Jonah, why are you not saying this? Why are you not saying this?
Probably.
But I like to have different perspectives, different sort of, I don't know, just opinions and all that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. If you want to hear more about I can't speak English. Anglicanism?
Anglicanism, yes.
Like go check out his channel because I'm sure he can inform you better than I can. But it's very cool. I love the firstly the passion that you have for it, the attention to detail, like all that kind of stuff. But there's something that stands out to me about you. It's like, I don't really know how to word it, but it's you're an individual that is seeking individual truth for yourself. If that makes sense. Like you're not banking your sort of theology or your beliefs around with the people around you. That I think is a common thing, and I probably do the same. But with you, I think even from when you were speaking about earlier, like when you were 11 and whatnot, it's like, I like Donald Trump, and it went, it's just like even stuff like that. Even like everyone around you was, like I don't know who was it back then?
Clinton. They didn't. Not everyone necessarily liked Clinton. They just did not like Trump.
Fair. Yeah.
But
anyway, that's beside the point. But it's you had the individualism. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. The individualism to actually be like, you know what, I'm actually gonna
stubbornness, maybe.
You could call it to actually, okay, I'm actually gonna sort of research or gonna be like, this is what I actually believe. And I think it's a good trait to have.
Yeah.
It might lead to stubbornness. I don't know.
It has sometimes. No, best term is probably, I'm familiar with the term, so I don't know why I didn't think of it first time, but principled, basically. Like, I actively do not, it's been a very consistent theme in my life, I actively do not want to just be taken on by any number of trends and what have you. And I guess me, like, never being among the popular kids, I guess that might have kind of helped with that. I've always been very used to kind of being on the outcast and just thinking of things as such rather than with popular trends. So I think that's like, now that I never really thought about that until like literally this second. But yeah, I guess that actually psychologically primed me, being one of the weird kids in school. It kind of primed me to not really caring a lot about the popular trend. And then eventually, as I think about intellectual issues with depth, that I now think of them rather than just thinking, oh, what are all the big scholars saying? What do all the academics say? I don't really care for that. I care for about what about the thing as it is, as such. Like, what are the principles of the matter and what are the facts of the matter? How do I like to focus on that?
That's really cool. Yeah, there's so much to sort of respect about the way you think, the way you act. And then there's so many words that you said, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like,
bring him up. I'll explain it. That's my channel.
It's your channel. But it just shows you, like, I don't know if you necessarily agree with this, but it's like, I go to a Baptist church. I don't really hold to like I'm not super intent about like, okay, I'm a Baptist sort of thing. I'm just like
1689 or death.
Yeah. So I'm just like, look, I read God's word and then, like, I believe what it tells me, sort of thing. And it's cool that someone like me that probably is more like amongst the popular, I guess, that I actually probably around me at least. And you're a hardcore Anglican. It's cool that we can have a conversation. And
absolutely.
It's, look, I could be wrong, you could be wrong, or whatever. Like, but we serve the same God.
Absolutely.
And we know that Christ died for us. And I don't know if you have a perspective. My dogs are losing it.
Nice.
I don't know if you have a perspective on this or an opinion about why do you think there are a lot of, like, I did not expect to get into this conversation, but why do you think there are a lot of different denominations? We have like extremely smart people. I know you're extremely smart, but we have people that are sorry, people that are even smarter than you and that have probably put more intention into history and all this kind of stuff. Why do they come to a different conclusion?
Yep. I think it's ultimately what I mentioned before with the near apostasy event, where unbelievers, they act like they're being neutral, but they actually have presuppositions. That's basically the reason why people of great intelligence can come to wildly different conclusions, because they have different priors, at whatever level, whether it's at the very base level of just their deepest, like, carnal desires of some kind. Some people can, even really intelligent people, can be overcome by that, and they just kind of put a little intellectual veneer over it to make it look like it's intellectual when it's actually they just want to do something carnal. Other times it's just they happen to see things in life in a certain order of events such that one thing has more power over the other, and that makes presuppositions of that thing much more impactful. So case in point, kind of what I mentioned before with me, how me not being the popular kid, that kind of primed me better with the presupposition that just because a lot of people believe something doesn't mean it's true. Obviously not that people more like you, for example, even people who are in the popular crowd, that doesn't mean they necessarily believe that, but it's just with my experience, that just happened to be something that came to me more readily compared to a number of other people where because of that experience, I came to not be a person who I'd see something's popular and, oh, okay, I'll go with that. And of course, with certain topics of discussion today, that can get you into very dangerous waters. But hey, that's just me. So that's basically, honestly, that's really the ultimate reason why that there can be different Christian denominations, there can be different Christian traditions, all upheld by incredibly intelligent, well-learned people. And it's ultimately just because they have different interpretive foundations. That's fundamentally what it is.
Yeah, true. I want to ask you about school, because we've mentioned it quite a bit, and I think this will probably bring it back to like my nostalgia, your nostalgia. But so during school, you say you were, even when you were what socially inept and whatever. Part of the, what would you say, outcasts or whatever. Like,
pretty much.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I hated school. Like I if you listen to like the first podcast I recorded, the literal first, I talk about school and I'm like, it felt like I was not bullied, but it was like to that extent. It's just interesting. Yeah, so it's interesting. Because there are certain things that were happening behind the scenes and that kind of stuff. I say behind the scenes, but it's just like, I don't know. It's like when I tried to take my faith seriously, things started to happen with friends and all that kind of stuff. And I don't blame my friends because I'm like, I became a bit more judgmental and all that kind of stuff. I was trying to like overcompensate, I guess, for like. So it's interesting because you say you were an outcast, but I'm like thinking about it. I was like sure we have the groups, but it's like even in my group, it's sort of, there were times where I'm like, I feel like an outcast. Yeah. And I think that's probably, you mentioned it a little bit where you're like, you were one of the kinder ones. Probably a reason why. Probably because I was like, you know what, like I think obviously in school it's hard to see past, like I'm in my friendship group. I'm trying to sort of boost myself in this circle that I'm in. But I think once you're the one that's getting stepped on, sort of thing, it's like, okay, I have a different perspective now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I apologize if there was any times I sort of.
I don't think there was any with you. I think there was only one time where I was
with me.
With you,
Oh,
where
no.
I was asking you just some innocuous question. It wasn't like a serious question, but it was just like, hey, it was some kind of question. It was in the primary school basketball court. I think it was in year 5, and you just looked at me. You just responded to me, your mum.
Wow, that does sound like me.
And I was like, okay. Other than that, though, I think you were fine. Nah, for real. Like, and that's not just because you're here, but legit, like you were fine. It was mostly certain other characters who'd be a bit less friendly with me.
Yeah. Like I said,
but otherwise, even with some of them now, like we're cool. Like afterwards, like some of them went to Hillsong, for example. We became totally cool, good mates or whatever.
Yeah.
I won't name names, but
Yeah,
but yeah, and actually that's actually really good you bring that up. Where even in the popular groups, there can be people who are like, well, they don't really feel that popular. They feel kind of like beaten down or whatever. That's actually something I kind of thought about. I think it was mainly through certain TV shows or whatever, to be fair. But they were very realistic in their portrayal of school social dynamics, where even in the popular club, there can be the guys, and even with like the head honcho of the popular groups, they can actually be internally quite fearful and feeling like, well, no, actually, I feel like a slave to this kind of stuff, having to keep up this image, or even more explicitly, like what you were saying, you do feel more and more outcasted, even if you're in that clique. So that's something I ended up, like, I didn't really ever put a huge amount of time into it, but when it came up, I was like, no, that's actually kind of interesting. Like, popular people, they're humans too. So.
Yeah, it's true. And it usually, like, I think we hear it all the time. It's like, if someone's bullying you, there's something else going on behind the scenes. Sort of thing. And that's probably true, but it's like, first of all, we're very young. We don't really know what we're doing. It's funnily enough, in year 8 was when I think I became a Christian when I was in year 4 or something. Like, that's the 2008. What year were we in?
2008. That would have been like year
3, I think, right?
3 or 2, one of those.
Yeah, I was very young.
Yeah,
so it was 2008. But honestly, I didn't really take it seriously until in year 8. Funnily enough, obviously you have like these morals that you hold from your parents and stuff. But I think because you know me from year 5 to year 8, which is funny, because I think I was like I was my worst version, because I was like bullying. I wouldn't say bullying, but it was like the level of bullying was much higher back then for me. It's just, even with the people that are popular in quotations, if you're listening on Spotify, the people that are popular, they would, like, I think very quickly it catches up to you, like, what am I doing really? In year 8, that's what hit me, like, what am I actually doing? Like, I'm looking back and I'm like, and I've had the privilege of messaging a few people saying like I apologize for certain situations, or but it just hits you like quick, and you're just like, I did all of this. It leads to nothing. I'm probably more of a nerd than all of you guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like I have 3 monitors. I have a sound. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah. So I hope that I didn't do any of the bullying. But
No, honestly, like legit, I don't. Apart from the one your mum thing, that was more weird than bullying. But apart from that, I genuinely don't remember you doing anything bad. So we're good.
Yeah, that's good.
We're good. It's more.
I think
other people.
Even if you ask any of them, I would hope.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the boys are they're different now.
Oh, 100%.
Like,
yeah, 100%.
I haven't really I've kept my distance. I haven't kept my distance, but I haven't really spoken to many of them since I left until probably like around last year.
Okay.
There was a lot there was a few, like Jacob is my closest friend. Jacob.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was one of my.
I was gonna say. Okay, no. I think I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So me and him have kept in touch and stuff. We've had our ups and downs, but all the other boys, like I haven't really spoken to. But then recently I had like Nathan on.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it's just seeing the difference in their lives. It's like seeing the difference in your life. It's like,
yeah,
I would not have expected Paul to be here. You know what I mean? Like, it's cool to just sort of take a step back and be like, everyone has had their own separate journeys. Everyone has been on their whatever life has thrown them. Maybe they've had the most easy, simple life ever. Maybe they've had the toughest life ever. Yeah. But they've all sort of led to a position that is so probably different to who they were. It sort of puts it all in perspective, because I think the people that were treating you unkindly, if you had a chat with them today, they would be like, bro,
no, 100%, yeah,
I'm sorry, like,
and as I mentioned, there were like, I won't name them, but there were a couple who were like that, but afterwards, even only just a few years afterwards, like we were cool.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's a weird dynamic in it.
It really is.
Yeah. So I think how long we've been going for? We've been going for an hour. I do tend to go for an hour and a half, but it's up to you.
I'm game for however long you want. Yeah.
Just trying to think. Is there any topics that you would like to sort of touch on? Actually, this is if you are from Paul's channel, you're probably gonna like realize like this is such a different.
Oh yeah.
Different. What's it called?
Like kind of
vibe.
Discussion. Yeah, completely different. Like, like with my channel, I'm always talking about something like, okay, guys, let's talk about this Bible passage and this theological matter. Let's talk about, did Saint Irenaeus believe in the papacy? Let's talk about.
See, these are just words I don't even know what they mean.
I'll tell you afterwards if you want, but yeah, let's talk about that kind of stuff. Let's talk about, let's say, let me try to flex as hard as I can. Can we talk about whether a reformational Anglican epistemology has a consistent epistemic grounding? Let's talk about that. Yeah. But then over here, yeah, exactly as you said, it's like, no, this is life stuff. This is life talking about the what's happened with us since the 11 years difference since I left at the end of 2013, and and I like to say, whenever I talk about how I've been since Toonie versus today, I always like to say I'm basically a completely different person. Yeah. Especially because of the conscious effort with social skills and what have you.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah.
The funny thing is, Reverend David, I don't know what to call him, Reverend David Old. He actually, after the podcast, he's like, why don't you try and get like bigger guys on that? And fun enough, you messaged me when he said bigger, he meant like, I don't think he meant like in numbers or anything. He meant like
physical size.
No, physical size. Maybe it did mean in numbers. I don't know what he specifically meant. But
maybe like guys with a public persona.
Yeah, maybe it was something like that. And I was like, yeah, I would love to, but and I'm more than willing to have any of them on. But I wouldn't want to sort of talk about what they talk about. I would want to talk about like, I want to make it just like, sort of, they're a real person. Let's talk about their life, sort of thing.
That's actually a really good niche. You could do that. You actually could do that.
Yeah, it's just honestly the hardest thing. God has been so, his hand has been over it massively, But the hardest thing is finding a guest every week. It's so hard because I'm doing once a week for this whole year.
Mate, trooper.
Yeah,
That's the
been,
grind.
it's been difficult, but man, God is like, even you messaging me this week. Was it this week? Yeah, this week.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was just because I don't have an episode for Monday. But this is it. But like, it's been falling into place.
That's real. That's awesome, bro.
I do want to ask you a question about your brain.
Sure.
So obviously, theology is so deep, and it's wonderful. Theology is a wonderful thing, but my question is, like, how do you find the balance between getting so deep into theology, but also having that like relationship with God? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. That is actually something I was really bad at. As I was getting really into this stuff in like the late 2010s through the early 2020s, even recently, I've been pretty bad with the imbalance of so much of the intellectual heavy work stuff, but very little of the actual spirituality. So that was a big problem I did have. That's something I forgot to mention. And so only over the past few months, particularly I guess from St. John's, but it was still very slow and gradual from St. John's when I started to take my spirituality seriously. But then especially over the past few months, as I've started to actually get more organized with spiritual life. In particular, for example, the small group of Sydney Anglican friends here who are of the more traditional bent like me. We love our Anglican heritage. We literally spend our days like reading and discussing like 16th, 17th century Anglican works. You know, that's our thing. And even like making a big catalog of them, you know. But other than that, we have consciously, we're in like a bit of an informal kind of group together. And we explicitly made it there where, yes, we want to discuss this intellectual stuff, but we very explicitly want to avoid just having our meetups as, oh, what did Thomas Kremer believe about the presence in the Eucharist? Or what did Richard Field believe about the Jure Divino Episcopacy? Say that 3 times fast.
But can't say it once.
we didn't want to just make it about that. We wanted to talk about that stuff, but we actually wanted to, okay, how does all this esoteric stuff actually apply to a real Christian living, to a real Christian life? And so one of the first works that we read through together as a group was this really good work, which I will recommend to you and the viewers here, is an excellent work actually by a Scottish theologian, but it was like republished and endorsed by an Anglican archbishop in the 17th or so century. So it's okay, it's Anglican approved. And it's this work by a theologian, Henry Scougal, called The Life of God in the Soul of Man. And it's basically, what is the Christian life? What does that look like? And it's the great thing about even older spiritual works like that, same with academic works, but also older spiritual works, they just hit completely different to the modern spiritual works you get today. Even if there's good ones modern, obviously I'm not one of those guys like, oh, everything modern bad, you know. That's an extreme that people of my bent can sometimes fall into. But they just hit different. And I think there's something more often, not always, but often there's something much more powerful with older spiritual works, like the detail they go into the nature of the spiritual life, and even just the way they frame it. They frame it in such ways that can be very different to the modern mind. And so that was the first work we went on, and actually just Saturday today. So yeah, last night, Friday, we had another meetup, and we just started on another work. Well, really a 2-part work by another Anglican theologian, Jeremy Taylor. And it's a 2-part work, Holy Living and Holy Dying. And so we're starting on Holy Living. We read through the first 2 sections and discussed it last night. And those 2 sections are on how to rightly use your time and on the nature of pure intentions and how to make sure you have pure intentions in everything you do. That first one in particular, we spent most of our discussion on because it's a very common thing for us. And for me in particular, that's been a big struggle for me, of just being able to use your time rightly. Like in your station that God has given you, how do you use it rightly? How do you not just waste it away or use it on evil even? And Taylor talks a lot about how idleness, basically the old rephrasing of the Bible verse, idle hands do the devil's work. He basically says that an idle man is ripe as a victim for temptation and for sin. Whereas a man who keeps himself busy with good works, like sin doesn't really have an opportunity to get in there except by accident or occasion. And so to kind of bring it back, basically, yeah, I've had historically a pretty bad imbalance with focusing almost exclusively on academic stuff and not on the spirituality of the faith, which is really where it is principally, And so yeah, it's only recently where I've started to do that. And the key to making sure of that, as someone, for any other nerds who are watching, the key to ensuring that you keep that balance is to basically I'll even do it in nerdy terms. Think of the Aristotelian cause or final cause, the end to which something is made. So think of the final cause of your academic theological study. Why are you doing that? Like, just really think about it. Why are you doing it? If it's purely for intellectual stimulation, it's useless. It's completely useless. Like, if you're a self-avowed Christian, you are doing the heavy academic work because it glorifies God and you want to understand his revelation to us, his creation more, and thus ultimately how that informs our life in him and our life with him. So that's ultimately the key, is to keep it burned into your brain and to keep it constantly and explicitly in the front of your mind that I am doing this deep academic stuff for the glory of God in order to inform a spiritual life. Therefore, I do also need to prioritize that spiritual life. Simple things, whether it's prayers, whether it's going to church, participating in studies. But also with that same group, we also now weekly pray through the evening prayer in the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, which I'd actually highly recommend to you or to anyone as basically a prayer, like a ready-made prayer regimen. It's fantastic. I genuinely believe it is the greatest liturgy in the English language, period. It's amazing. So we pray that regularly, and that includes scripture readings through a liturgical calendar, and it basically goes through the entire Bible. And so that's ultimately what I say on that. How do you keep the balance? You ultimately keep the purpose of your deep theological study at the front of your mind, and that will, by God's grace, compel you to also keep up with the spiritual life.
Yeah, well, good answer. Do you like, this happens to me, and I could imagine maybe it happens to you, but do you sometimes look at like people that have like a simple mind, a simple just a simple view of God? Do you sometimes have like a jealous view of that? A righteous jealous, I think I would say.
That is brilliant that you pointed that out, because that's actually, I was actually thinking about, do I want to say it now? I don't know. Not because I think it's bad, but just because I don't feel like saying it. But I was literally just thinking about how the way I used to frame it a lot in this issue is that the random Christian grandma who knows nothing about ancient Greek, knows nothing about genre studies, or about controversies on the Trinity, or controversies on the two natures of Christ, or ecclesiology, the papacy, as a Christian grandma who may know absolutely none of that compared to myself and others, and yet she may have a fuller and more true life of faith before God. And that is ultimately what's going to be what is going to be seen by God at the final judgment. He's going to look at her, he's going to look at that grandma, that Christian grandma who knows nothing academically and yet just clings onto him by faith. And he's going to say to her, well done, my good and faithful servant. Whereas, God forbid, it's scary to think, but some self-proclaimed Christians who have barely any life of faith, and yet they can rag on about any number of academic issues. They'll be before the judgment seat, and God will say, "Depart from me, because I never knew you." So that's that. So in terms of that, I do genuinely, in like a good way, because there's distinct terms. There's jealousy, there's envy.
Yeah, that's why I said jealousy.
Exactly. Yeah. So a righteous jealousy. I do genuinely have a righteous jealousy of those people who don't think about these issues to the same depth, and yet they have a much more direct and consistent spiritual life with God. Because I'm still very much developing in that, whereas there's others who, like my parents, for example, they're not into these issues compared to me at all. Except my mum, she's kind of is, but.
You got her into it.
Yeah, exactly. But my dad's probably the best example. He doesn't study these academic stuff at all, and yet he's much more spiritually planted than I am right now. So yeah, I do have a kind of righteous jealousy of that for those with a simple faith.
Yeah. What would you like obviously we probably don't have the answer, but what would you think that you would attribute like their faith to if they don't know all this stuff? If that does that make sense?
It is simply just knowing that good news,
Mm.
that they heard that good news. They realize, well, first they heard the bad news and they realized the bad news was true. And then they heard the good news and they realized somehow, at least by basic stuff like, hey, here's these ancient testimonies to Christ. Like at a very basic level, there is an evidential understanding in people. There has to be for a good and consistent Christian faith. But they don't bother going into all the arguments about stuff. They just hear, hey, here's these ancient testimonies to who Christ is, who Jesus is, what he did for us, the miracles he works, the resurrection. And they realize, okay, no, this is good and true. But ultimately the principal cause is by the testimony of the Holy Spirit inside them. That's principally what draws people to God, even with a completely simple faith that hasn't addressed any of the major academic issues. That is ultimately it, the Spirit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a good answer as well. Yeah, I often think, because I know I've said this a lot, but I'm not like extremely theologically inept, but I still like dabble in it. I still sometimes I get consumed by it as well. And one of the podcasts I recorded there, it was just a simple, like, it was a testimony, and it was just, there was no sort of theology involved in it. I was just there. I sort of thought about it afterwards. I was like, man, like, it's a simple life, but it is like, they get it.
Yeah.
It's like God loves them. They love God. Obviously, they've experienced life. They've done all this stuff. But it has been like, I don't know how to, like, you can see the gifts that they have as well just by them living. Like, it's really cool. And I think one of the big things of probably your dad and who, like, whatever, is experience is a big thing. I think the more you go in life, it's like, I don't know. Even you're 25, I'm 25.
24.
24. Turning 25.
Yeah.
25 years. If I look at myself 4 years ago, the amount that I've grown, even in this 4 years, and I'm not even talking about growing in knowledge or anything, but the amount of, like, okay, I understand life a lot more.
Yeah.
I'm understanding stuff about myself, like, still, literally, like, recently. I'm learning so much about myself, and I'm like, I'm 25. People have like a triple my age. You know what I mean? Like, there's 75-year-olds that have experienced so much more life than me.
Yeah.
And that's probably why they're just like, at the end of the day, like, God matters.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's there's some things that I would attribute to it as well. I think, like, comfort is a big one. I think if you look at someone that is going through, like, let's say, like, someone in Palestine, let's say,
yeah,
they're going through it, but they probably have more faith than all of us, but they don't know as much as us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just like they're in an uncomfortable situation, but they are relying on God more than any of us could, really.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things to attribute. I just, the reason why I brought it up is, like, I'm a weird person. And I, like you, I don't really go with the popular opinion sort of thing.
Right.
Literally every second sentence of mine is like, oh, I have a hot take. But it's cool because we're both different, but we're also both a bit against the grain, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just like to sort of bring in, like, a different perspective, maybe hopefully get you thinking about, like, okay, I love the fact that you, like, I said it to you before, like, one of the smartest people theologically I know, and I love that. But I think just bringing it back to, like, the root of, like, okay, it's about my relationship with my dad, really. Like, you know what I mean? It's my relationship with God, who is my dad, my friend, my everything. It's like, how do I have a good friendship with someone? You don't just learn about them; you know them, sort of.
Yes.
Thing. Yeah. Was there anything else that you would want to talk about?
Sheesh.
We only have a bit of time left, so
we
can end here.
Jeez, that's a good question. What really more? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. You have anything you're curious about? I mean, other than a billion issues where we could do future episodes. On,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like with the time that we have, probably not.
Yeah,
because like, but I'm happy to end here. Thank you for coming on.
Mate, thank you so much for inviting me. That was awesome to hear. Yeah, just reaching out like, hey, awesome episode with Reverend Old, so good. And then you say, hey, do you want to come on? I'm like, yeah. I'm so good to reconnect.
You know what's funny? I was because actually Jacob encouraged me to ask you, and I was like,
really?
Yeah, like this was like months ago.
Wow.
Actually, when I found out you were on Redeem's, when like I heard that you were on Redeem's Zoomer's channel, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then Jacob's like, you should ask him. I was like, I don't want to feel like I don't want him to feel like I'm just like sort of using him or anything. It's like, I don't know. My brain thinks like that.
Honestly, I'll tell you now to kind of relieve you. I would not have thought that at all.
Okay, perfect.
I would have thought, hey, he's an old mate kind of from school, reaching out again. He probably saw me and redeemed it. Yeah, 100%. I'd be game.
Yeah,
because Jacob he actually reached out to me after the Zoomer thing as well. He actually that's probably why.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And I love your Facebook posts. It's the Lord's Day, my dudes.
It's the Lord's Day, my dudes. That's it.
That's good. If you sorry, they have no context. Pretty much every Sunday is it Sunday. Yeah, every Sunday he holds his Bible. Are you on a bus?
Yeah,
usually on a bus. Hold his Bible, takes a selfie, and it's just the caption. It's the Lord's Day.
I haven't been doing it recently just because my phone. I got this phone in like 2018, and it's so close to carking. Its storage is messed, so I haven't been taking photos for doing it. But as soon as I get my new phone, that's happening again weekly.
Yeah,
new Lord's Day post content, boys.
And sometimes I look at the comments and I'm like, I don't understand any of these memes because they're just so like the Anglican, Roman Catholic. I'm like, I don't know.
That's a whole world. Like you need to like know a few books of law before you can understand this stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that would probably be funny if I understood it. There's something that obviously I get. Yeah, thank you for. Actually, there was one question about. I know this is a bit niche, but you sort of mentioned that you. I know in school you loved creative writing, but you also mentioned something about you doing writing now.
It's kind of background type stuff. Okay. Yeah. But I do eventually. I do generally think I might put something out eventually. That's a couple of things. I won't go specifics yet.
Yeah,
maybe one of them. Yeah. One of them kind of something on a realistic story of like a young man's Christian life in certain aspects of it, and in certain parts of that kind of life that aren't really reflected a lot in fiction or discussion much outside of certain circles. That, and then also more like speculative fiction type stuff as well. I'll just be straight up. How would the church react to aliens? I'll just be straight up. And I actually do want to kind of map out like what's like a really realistic scenario of like the theological debates that would happen. Like if we find another intelligent species, what would that look like? The theological debates, or what would be the different positions people would throw about? What existing issues would kind of be inflamed and all that? I think that's a genuinely fascinating thing to kind of speculate about. Just to throw it out there.
How much time do we have? No, it's so funny because like I have friends that they hold to this. We're Baptists, you know, like that's my church. So with the end times, we are pre-mill. I'm not gonna say we actually because I don't hold a standpoint.
Fair enough.
But as Baptists, we are pre-mill. So we're like. We have some conspiracy theories. They're actually pretty funny. Like they're pretty cool and they're pretty like legit. They could be, but people have this theory that they're gonna like it's gonna be an alien. The Antichrist is gonna be an alien, and it's because like people are gonna be like, oh, Christianity is not real anymore. Like the Bible's fake. Because
Project Bluebeam.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
There you go. You know the name.
It basically is that. Yeah, there'll be at least maybe a staged alien event of some kind that basically something that just allegedly discredits Christianity.
Yeah. Then this will be like the Antichrist and all this stuff, and I'm like, it's fair enough. I forgot. There's a podcast, and it talks about like, it's so funny. What's it called?
Is it Christian or?
Yeah, it's Christian. It's like a Christian conspiracy theory.
Onto Cosmos.
Yes, yeah. The Haunted Cosmos. Haunted Cosmos?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I haven't listened to a lot of it, but from what I've heard and from what my friends have told me, I'm like, pretty, pretty interesting.
Nice
discussions. But I'm excited to see you write a book. Obviously, if it's down the track or whatever. Probably won't not say anything.
Well, a closer book is one I actually am making right now. It's a fair bit way through it. I've discussed it a couple of times in the channel, I think. Basically a guide how to read the Church Fathers, especially in light of how Roman and Eastern apologists will say, "Oh, read the Fathers. Look, they clearly believe us," and all that. And it's like, "Oh, Ignatius mentions bishops. I should become Roman Catholic now." It's like, hello, us Anglicans, we got bishops. I know my bishops now. I met my bishop. But yeah, basically a book on, okay, here's how you approach the Church Fathers. Here's how you read them in a principled manner with a concern for historical accuracy, philosophical accuracy, interpretive accuracy, so that you don't fall for the distortions of other traditions. So that one is coming closer to release.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's mad. But we have a group chat and it's called the Early Church Fathers.
Really?
Because I have I'm not the image for my church and people around me. People around me love like I'm actually thinking maybe next podcast having one of them, having you.
Heck yeah.
Just debate. Also not debate, but just have a conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it'll be very interesting. Like you'll probably throw some words out there, probably won't understand, but that's okay.
Don't worry, I can adjust myself.
But that would be interesting. Maybe that can be the next episode.
I'll be game for that. Yeah,
I'll speak to the boys.
Sweet.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, anyway, I feel like we've waffled enough. Well, thank you, Paul, for coming. I'll actually let you. I mean, we've shouted it up before, but if you want to shout out anything else or just a channel or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me on, having me here, having this kind of reconnection and a massive, unbelievable nostalgia trip, like bonkers. I guess, just if people are interested in my kind of content of serious yet intelligible, understandable academic depth dives into Holy Scripture, theology, and ancient history, and particularly church history. And if you're and especially if you're struggling with the claims of other traditions, especially Rome and the East, and and frankly your foundations in trusting in Christ and the Scriptures are kind of being shaken because of that, subscribe to my channel, The Other Paul, on YouTube. I've got my website as well, theotherpaul64.com, where I do blog type stuff. And those are really the main ones. If you want my hot takes, go to my Twitter at theotherpaul2, because someone took other Paul there as well. Right? And yeah, because I refuse to call it X. That's just dumb. But yeah, so that's where you can find me. You can find my content and look out for my book. It's gonna be great.
All right, they'll probably, hopefully, if I remember, they'll all be in the description. Yeah, just have a look there. Thank you, Paul, for coming. Thank you all for watching. We'll have you on for sure again.
Keen.
Yeah, my friends love to debate against like orthodoxy and stuff. So it's
okay.
I don't think they've debated against Anglicans.
Okay.
So
these are all Baptist friends, yeah?
Yeah, Baptist friends. Time to cook.
Chef Paul's in the house, boys.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. Thank you again, Paul, for coming. And I will see you guys next week. And peace.